So, I've been studying a little bit of like film terminology lately, um, getting kind of deep into it, I'm very glad I have because it's helped me kind of understand this episode a bit. I actually uncovered kind of like a specific term that they use in film and like cinema critiques to describe some things, and I think it worked for this episode. It might be a little bit of an obscure take here, but the term that I came across was "fucking bonkers."
Yeah. That sounds that's technical terminology, but
It's a little bit technical,
but
a little bit highbrow there, but
yeah. I was afraid you were gonna say bad, and I was like, this episode is gonna be a fight.
It was
because I believe it's absolutely insane, and I loved every second of it.
It was very, very good. I'm not without some reservations, but very, very good, and I love how bonkers it was. I love so many things that I saw some people say were too weird.
Yeah, I feel like this is almost what I was asking for the previous weeks when I was saying what I want is like a weird, like out there, really good Doctor Who story.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't think we would get one, and we got one like last second. The last possible opportunity.
This is what I was talking about with Demons, where it's very much a character drama, and you kind of know how it has to end. But it's Doctor Who. You can have a moving character drama and a conscious universe that takes the shape of a frog. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, so the point that I'm going to have to concede that I've said previously on this podcast was I was saying that I was defending, I forget which episode I was defending, but it was one of the guest writer episodes where I was saying, like, they did a good job utilizing all the characters. They didn't really add any more depth to them or, like, flesh them out anymore, but I don't think that guest writers can really do that often. There's only a handful of guest episodes that have done that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this episode proved that, yes, you can be, the other writers had the opportunity to flesh out these characters.
Yeah.
Because this is the most fleshed out and interesting the characters have been so far, and it was a guest-written episode.
Definitely, yeah, there was definitely some risks almost that they took with the characters that it kind of felt like maybe should know was a little bit like, hey, it's my job that I'm doing badly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ryan is still weak for me.
Yeah.
He has a nice moment with Graham. He was funny though, but he was still like pointing out what was happening on screen a couple of times. He was still a bit weak. But Yaz in particular, I think, is really coming into her own all of a sudden.
They actually fully acknowledge her police officer background, and not just in the sense of, like, kablam, we were saying, oh, they sort of did, but not really.
Mm-hmm. But
this one was 100% like, she talked about how she'd been trained to work with children as part of her police officer job. She was in, like, investigating things in a very, like, police way. She referenced being a police officer multiple times. It's like the first time that she's actually felt 100% like a police officer rather than Chibnall, like, flipped a coin and was just like, police officer, that's her job.
Yeah, she really kind of came through finally in this episode, and I was very happy to see that, because I was thinking that she was the worst one for the first few episodes. And she's not quite at Graham right now, but like her and Graham are working pretty well all of a sudden.
I think the thing is as well, this episode was a very Graham focused episode.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that Yaz was sort of secondary and Ryan was tertiary, I don't think would have been issues provided that Chibnall's episodes had used all of the characters right, or that there had been some proper focus on Ryan or Yaz at another point. So the issue is just the episode focused primarily on Graham, and the other characters were still good, except Ryan was a little iffy. But I don't feel like it's possible to fully flesh out all three characters at the same time, and that would be an unrealistic expectation to put on our guest writer.
Right. I think this writer, whose name I'm totally blanking on, made a smart move to give the guest characters like a backseat in this episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think they did a good job by having only 3 guest characters, and one of them is four guest characters. You're right, but all of them have like a distinctive role in the plot, and they don't need that much time put on them. So even I felt like all of the characters were pretty fleshed out, except for Trina, who would have been difficult to flesh out, given that she's kind of a mess of just a representation of a sentient universe.
Yeah, and I think he was clever in that it was usually only one of them at a time. Like, it was Hana for a long time, and then there was a little bit of error.
Yeah.
And then at the end, it's just Doctor and Sentient Universe thing.
Yeah.
I love when I get to say a sentence about Doctor Who that just makes no sense.
Yes.
Those are the best kinds.
So it was written by Ed Hine.
Ed Hines. That's weird, because I had a music teacher named Ed Hines.
I think it's just Hine,
Hine.
not Ed Hine.
Okay. No, so it's not my old music teacher, which would have been very weird. I have no idea who this person is. I need them to come back. I need them to commit to an episode a year for 3 or so years.
Yeah, I would love an episode from him every year. Now he could actually be the Chibnall era Moffat.
Yeah, he could be like the star guest writer that you look forward to once a year.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like out of the last couple writers, I feel like there's Joy Wilkinson feels like she could be sort of like the Gaddis or Roberts, like, writes a fun episode every year, like, consistently good. Mm-hmm. And then he feels more like the Stephen Moffat, like, writes a episode that just completely, like, blows you away with what it does every year.
I will say that the closest episode to this one in terms of, like, enjoyment for me would have been Listen from Series 8. And that's like a big compliment and kind of an insult at the same time. Because I don't know if you remember my feelings on Listen. It's been a while.
I don't remember your feelings on Listen.
Listen came so close to being like one of my favorites, and didn't quite land with me. And that would be my feelings on this one. So close to being like a true top tier episode for me. I'll still call it a classic or like a knockout episode.
Yeah.
But it came like that close to being like upper tier episodes for me, and just missed. And it's kind of painful because I feel like it was very, very close. And so I might wind up giving it a little bit more critique than it deserves, just because I feel like it was so close to being like an all-time great. But it's still like, if this had showed up in Series 9, I would have been like, yep, another solid episode, season keeps going, you know.
Yeah, I'm like, this isn't, for me, it wouldn't go into like my top 10 episodes of Doctor Who of all time or anything, I don't think. Mm-hmm. But it's, well, I don't think it would, no. But it is really, really good, and it's definitely by far the best episode of this season.
By far. And so once again, I find myself wondering about your predicament with your number scores.
Yes. So I think I would give it a 10. And you can be like, the problem is that the reason that I've been pushing for us to go off number scores, I genuinely want to phase out the number scores next series, is that number scores are inherently arbitrary.
Mm.
Because saying an episode is a 10 doesn't really mean anything unless you have a specific definition for what a 10 is. Because it's not like grading a school assignment where it's just like you've got the criteria to look at. And you're just like, did it meet all of this? Like when you were saying one episode was incomplete, as if it was a school grade, and it's like, yeah, but there's not really like a criteria I can look at and be like, okay, did this meet all of the criteria for being a Doctor Who episode that gets a 10 out of 10?
Right. I have
yeah.
2 thoughts on the number scores. First, I agree that number scores are not the best, and I have this whole system that I created for movies that is not number score related, so it's a little weird that we went 1 through 10 for this.
Yeah.
But I think that mine were consistent this year. And
I think you were consistent this year. I think that I have never been consistent with my number scores.
Right.
And
like I made a joke after, I think it was Arachnids, about my arbitrary system. I think because I said it, I gave that one an incomplete out of 10. But that was actually like my brilliant masterstroke of this season, because not giving that a score freed me up so much for the future ratings. And I think you gave it like a 6 or something, and that screwed you up. So
I think I gave it a 7, because the problem is that I gave Ghost Monument a 6 because I wasn't prepared to give it a 5, because that felt like actually declaring it a bad episode. So yeah, all of my scores have been adjusted for the fact that I gave Ghost Monument a 6, and every single episode has been significantly better than Ghost Monument.
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah.
But the other thing about number scores is, like, would be probably a 9 for me, but saying it's a 9 out of 10, you're right, really doesn't explain how we feel about the episode, because
it doesn't.
Like, yeah, if I'm trying to think of another 9 that I gave. Well, like if I had given Demons a 9, and this number score would say Demons and this episode are basically the same, they're completely different in both like strengths and also like what they're about and how they're constructed and all.
Yes.
And there's just I feel like that's what rating systems should be doing, is it's more like, what is this like, rather than like, is this good, because I love terrible movies. You don't really, but like, I love
some terrible things. I love Cyberwoman, speaking of Chris Chibnall and Doctor Who, to bring us slightly back on track.
Right, slightly back on track. Well, yeah, that's actually a good point. I would give, not In the Forest of the Night. What's a really terrible Doctor Who episode?
Love and Monsters, Fear Her.
Actually, I'm gonna go with In the Forest of the Night. I would give that episode like a 3 or a 4, just because I find it like bizarrely dreadful, and not like boringly dreadful. Like, so there, even in number scores, it's not an objective quality rating. It's more of an enjoyment rating.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's systems that are better for that. And as far as enjoyment, oh man, this was the first time all season I was literally on the edge of my seat, and I actually like noticed just halfway through the episode, wow, I'm at the edge of my seat. Like, this is literally happening right now.
Yeah. This episode was, I feel like though we should cycle back around to this episode and to its strengths.
Well, I mean, that's
as fascinating as hearing us talk about number scores is.
Oh, right. That's kind of how my brain works.
Yeah.
I love that sort of thing. But for this episode, I love how small it starts, and like, you show someone the first 10 minutes of this episode, and then you tell them what happens. They would not believe you, and it ratchets up so fast, but not like overwhelmingly so. It goes 0 to 10. I felt like
it was it ratchets up really fast, but at the same time, the scale remains focused around like people.
Yeah.
And the consequences of the people in the story's actions.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of the time with Doctor Who, when it gets too big, then you start going into the Daleks just killed half the people on this planet, and it's just like, okay, cool. Did we know any of those people? It's a sad thing as a fact, but it's like it doesn't have as much of an impact because once things start getting too big, then the scale becomes hard for human beings to wrap their head around and feel anything about. Whereas this episode, because it stayed focused on the characters and how they responded to this, even though literally the entire universe was at stake and it had a threat from before time, it still felt very focused on the characters.
Right. It ratchets up the craziness to 10, but
Yes.
It doesn't. Yeah. I mean, even though the universe is kind of literally at stake, it's not like, oh, now London is falling into a time vortex, or
Yeah.
Yeah. So it feels very small while really being huge in stakes, and that was a delicate sort of tightrope. I love that there were things that just objectively did not make sense, but I think that was on purpose. Just
I felt like there were things that were slightly surreal and sort of odd. I don't know if I felt like it was such a surreal episode that it was difficult to tell where something actually didn't make sense.
Right. I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at. I think his name is Ribbons in the middle world. How did he get there? What is his job? What is the lantern?
I felt like I didn't need an explanation as to why Ribbons was there, or what his work. Yeah. You know what I mean? I was just he's just there. He's Ribbons. He's a weird dude. He eats people. I love Ribbons.
He's great. He was great, and I love that there's not really an explanation. It's just yep, that's the bridge between the universes. Deal with it. It's weird.
By the way, can I also say that I love the effects in this episode? The flesh moths and the lantern and Ribbons himself and the frog at the end. I was just it's all very... They did it with an impressive amount of practical effects. It looks like what classic Doctor Who would look like if they ever gave classic Doctor Who money.
Yeah. I mean, I was just
It's something that I've wondered for a long time. I was like, what would classic Doctor Who have looked like if they gave it a budget? And it's probably something like this.
The moment where the Doctor goes inside the mirror and it just trips out was awesome. I thought the effects were kind of surprisingly good. Usually you would expect them to kind of screw that up, that sort of effect up.
Yeah.
Looked good. The way the colors shifted and I think the music kicked in was just freaky. And then I love.
Yeah.
I finally liked the directing this season. I thought the directing was really good. Not even there wasn't the close up thing is gone. It was lots of two shots and over the shoulders, but the clever stuff. Did you notice that the shots in the other universe were mirrored?
Yep. Yeah. That was very clever as well.
That was very clever. It for the first time, the director added to the experience of the episode rather than just here's the camera. Yeah. So that was really cool. I mean, acting was great again. There's not anything technical that I don't like. The only thing I don't like is that there wasn't 10 or 15 more minutes.
I kind of could have. I feel like it kind of could have done with more time, but at the same time, it's I felt like it did a decent job with the time that it had.
Yeah, I don't think there was much of a way to improve it with the time it had. Just give it a little bit more time to expand on the themes here, and I think it would really be an all-timer. There was one thing I didn't really get, and it might have just because I saw it wrong. There was a moment early on in the episode where I thought Hannah slammed the door into Ryan and knocked him out. It was a twist, oh, she's evil or something.
She does.
She does. And then I
Because
don't
she was trying to
remember.
get into the mirror to go after them. She hits him, and then she goes into the mirror after the others to find her father.
And he goes
Because
into
she doesn't trust him.
He goes into the mirror after her. I don't remember that happening, which is weird.
It does happen, yeah. So she knocks him out. She goes into the mirror, and there are some shots of her feeling her way along until she gets to where Ribbon's body is, which is like a great shot because she doesn't realize the danger, and she doesn't even realize she's standing right over a dead body.
Right, that was great.
And then Ryan catches up with her. Yeah, so there was an actual progression of events there. So yeah. She knocks Ryan out, she runs into the mirror, Ryan follows her when he wakes up.
Yeah, the thing I missed was Ryan following her. I was a little bit confused when I saw him in the next place. When they first meet her, there's this great shot of her trying to use the sink. And I'm like, oh, she's blind. That was a good job, director. And then there was the line like, are you blind, Hannah? And I'm like, are you blind, doctor?
At the same time, I kind of feel like it was... Like, I felt like the thing is that there it didn't feel like the Are You Blind was supposed to be, it was supposed to just be like the doctor realizing. It didn't feel as much like exposition as some of the other dialogue in the rest of the season.
No, it wasn't the worst offender, but I thought to myself as that scene was happening, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it. And there were worse ways they could have done it, but the director got that information for us, and I think that the doctor would have gotten it. She wouldn't have needed to clarify, And Hannah doesn't even say yes, right? She just says
you wouldn't need to clarify, but I felt like it was that the characters within the story, it would be a bit odd to not mention it. They did, yeah.
I mean, just the fact that I'm pulling that out for a nitpick kind of shows where I'm at with this episode.
Yes, yeah. I agree. It was very good.
Sadly, because our tastes are kind of similar sometimes, I don't think we're going to argue very much, and that's what the internet seems to be doing. And again,
we need someone who's boring.
Who's boring.
There are all of these people on the internet who are just like, I don't really like the idea. I can't believe the Doctor Who had a talking frog, and I'm just like, this is Doctor Who. If you don't like talking frogs, then get out. That's what this show is for.
I mean, people are like, it could have been Susan, or it could have been, I don't know,
River.
I'm like, I think Talking Frog was the best one.
And the thing is that you could have done a version of the episode where you had Susan or River, but you wouldn't have put them in at the end. You would have put them in earlier when Grace shows up as the Doctor's equivalent to them.
Yeah.
You could have made a good episode based around that, but I think at that point the audience would stop paying attention to Graham and Grace, and the episode would be entirely about the Doctor reuniting with River or Susan.
Yeah.
And that would be a good episode, probably. Especially Ed Heim could probably do a great job of that story. But that would be what the story was now. It would be the episode where Susan shows up again, or the episode where River shows up again. Or whoever they chose, and that would have overpowered everything else about the story.
And it's not like the Talking Frog it just came out of nowhere. There's a reason why it chose a frog.
Yeah. And I think at that point, the universe isn't trying to trick the Doctor into staying. The universe just wants to talk to the Doctor, and the Doctor is genuinely fascinated by this universe, which I thought was a nice touch. I think I would have liked a little more of it earlier.
Yeah.
Because it just sort of pops up at the end, but I'm just like, that seems like such a doctorish attitude that she would be so fascinated by this universe.
I love that she was almost even more fascinated than she was scared by the situation.
Yeah,
and the frog kind of reminded me of The Good Place with the the moment where they think that the burrito is talking. Like, it's just that sort of level
Yes.
of absurd, and those are like basically the only two
Well,
shows
the
that get
funny
away
thing
with it.
is you haven't gotten to it yet because you haven't been watching the newest season on TV, have you?
I've seen the first 3 or 4 episodes.
Okay, then you have seen it. There's the key with the frog keychain.
Yeah, the frog keychain.
So that's what I thought of as well when you mentioned the good place. I was just like, there's the key to the door to the timeline. It's just like, why is there a frog on it? He's like, I like frogs.
Right.
Yeah.
The only 2 shows on TV that could get away with something as absurd as that, really,
are
the only 2 shows I really watch. What does that say about my taste?
It is such just a Doctor Who like thing to have a sentient universe voice like speaking as a talking frog. And speaking of the Doctor's sort of fascination with the universe, I felt like this episode gave Jodie Whittaker her best material yet, and she gave her best performance yet.
Can I just pretend to play devil's advocate because I'm tired of agreeing with you? Like, I thought it was terrible. I thought she got the worst material. Like, those words were not words, you know? That was awful. Like, why couldn't they bring back, I don't know, the guy who wrote Kill the Moon? That was much better.
I just felt like from the moment the episode started with when she's tasting the soil and like offering people soil, I felt like played to Jodie Whittaker's strengths in terms of how she plays the Doctor, which is that when she has something odd to do, I think she works better. And when she's written the more normal and human she's written, the less interesting she is.
That one was still a little reminiscent of 10 and his penchant for licking things, but I agree overall. Like, she's good when she's just alien and weird.
Yeah. Well, it's also, it was a thing that Matt Smith did a couple times as well.
Yeah, Smith did it too. I saw some people saying, like, for some reason, some people saying, like, she's not going to get anything out of tasting the soil. Come on, that's ridiculous. A, it's Doctor Who and the Doctor licks things. B, that's a real thing, apparently.
Yes, I saw that comment, and then I saw the response to it from someone who's a geologist, and it's just like, yeah, I'm a geologist. We like eat dirt to sort things out all the time.
I did not know that. I'm not surprised because geologists are weird.
I did actually know that, but that's just because I love weird things.
It's
yeah, and it's just such a doctorish thing to do.
Yeah, if you don't know something, lick
Actually, the funny thing is I just listened to a Big Finish audio as well that had the Doctor first of all sniff something, and then he like sticks it on his tongue, and the people who are with him are just like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "No, there are more sense receptors on the tongue than in the nose, so it's just a practical thing to do." Which just seems like such a sort of a doctorish, odd thing that she's not bothered at all by sticking a bunch of soil on her tongue to work out what's going on and where she is.
Right. Speaking of that scene, I think just the first line of the scene and the first line of the episode is something like, "Is this Norway? Is that a fjord?" And for some reason, when I heard that line, I was like, "This is going to be a good episode." I don't know why. It wasn't like a spectacular line or anything. I was just like, yeah, I think I have a good feeling about this one. Maybe because I like fjords.
Yeah. Well, it immediately made me think of there's a bit in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy that I think is in every version of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where a character called Slotty Bartfast is talking about how they created the Earth. And he's just like, the fjords were my bit, all the little fiddly bits about Norway. I won an award for those. And that scene definitely felt like it was, it definitely made me think of that, whether it was a conscious reference or not, because I think the Doctor even refers to it being, like, the fiddly bits.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think she kind of directly says that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go off topic because we keep agreeing. The episode weirdly had some parallels to one of my favorite movies, which also kind of made me like it a lot quicker than maybe I would have normally. Um, so Hana, the movie, has like a teenage girl named Hana, and a father who disappears on her, played by Eric Bana, and a mother who is dead, and it has allusions to fairy tales and monsters that don't turn out to be real, and it takes place in northern Germany rather than Norway, but still kind of close. And she has the same accent as Saoirse Ronan does in Hana, which means that one of them was wrong because you can't, like, German versus Norwegian, they're not going to sound the same, but whatever. And so these weird parallels to a semi-obscure movie that I really like were making me think that I wrote the episode. And then it had that...
And there's also... Yeah.
Yeah, then it had that moment where, like, it happened in that fanfic I wrote, like, 5 years ago for, like, the ending of a hypothetical season. And that's when I texted you, and I was like, I'm gonna sue them.
That was my immediate thought when it happened. It's not quite on par with the fact that I, around the same time, wrote a story where the Master was bringing people into the Matrix of Gallifrey, and they believed that they were dead, and the Master was in disguise for the whole episode and then revealed themselves at the end.
Yeah.
But it was pretty close to that.
Pretty close to that. There was a few, from that era of us doing fanfics, there's a few details that became parts of episodes, like, to a scary degree of accuracy. And this is all just to say that it's proof that we should run the show after Chibnall goes, because we're already kind of writing it.
Yeah. I believe that I should definitely be the next head writer of Doctor Who. Hey, Chris Chibnall went on television and criticized Doctor Who in the 80s, and now he's head writer. I am going on the internet and criticizing Doctor Who while he's writing it. Therefore, I will replace him in 20 to 30 years. That's the way it works. Those are the rules. I don't make them.
I think with inflation, it's like 50 to 60 years.
There won't be a world in 50 to 60 years. So, we gotta speed things up.
Alright, fair enough.
I do feel like there's a lot more to discuss here, though, than there was with the previous episode. So I don't know why we're struggling to find things to discuss, because I definitely felt like there were a lot of things I want to talk about.
I've hit all the things that really stood out to me. The problem comes from there's a lot of things that people are debating, and we have not yet disagreed once outside of, like, the ironic stuff. And I think it's less that there's, like, a lot of moving parts to discuss, and more of there's a few very controversial bits to the episode. But when our response to it was the same of we loved it, and people who didn't get it are stupid and shouldn't watch Doctor Who. I'm just shrugging.
That's my response to everything.
Yeah, you can't see me, but I'm shrugging. Like, there's not much more you can go off of that.
I do feel like there's more to discuss with in terms of, like, how where things were better in this episode than they've been so far, and what lessons the Chibnall era can take from this moving forward.
I think there's good instances of, like, Chekhov's gun in it, like with the speakers. Now, like, that was a good kind of setup and reveal. There's a lot of just, like, little clever details.
I think that it did a much better job of flipping a Doctor Who story on its head and being a completely different story than both Demons of the Punjab and Kablam tried it, and I think Demons of the Punjab did a better job. Kablam, I think, in trying to do it, completely destroyed every kind of point it was making and turned it incoherent in the last 10 minutes. Whereas this one, I think, did a really good job of it was playing to a trope of, like, it's an abandoned cabin in the woods, all nailed up. There's an alien creature out there in the forest, the Doctor and her companions are trapped inside the house with one scared girl, and they have to survive. And then the episode sort of flips it, and it's just like there's no creature out there. The danger is through the mirror inside the house. But it all felt earned, and it didn't feel like it was undermining the previous part of the episode, and it didn't feel like it was doing it just to be clever.
Yeah, I think the unofficial term for these kinds of episodes is base under siege, and it kind of seemed like it was going to be one of those where it's like, okay, protect the house from the evil alien monster. It really was not. But it was
like base under siege stories
different.
can be good, but I liked the direction this took much more than I would have liked a typical base under siege story.
Right. And it was so unexpected too. Well, maybe it was expected to everyone else who didn't avoid spoilers like the plague.
It wasn't at all expected to me. The only things that I'd heard about this episode were the basic premise of like a house in Norway. There's a little girl called Hannah, and she's the only one who's there. I called her a little girl, but she's like a teenager. Just everybody who's younger than like 16 looks like a baby to me now. This is the problem of growing old. I'm 23 for the record.
I'm 55.
Yeah. But even the spoilers didn't. There were no spoilers that I saw out there, but I haven't been looking for actual spoilers, obviously, because I don't want to spoil the episode for myself. I just haven't been avoiding trailers and things. But the trailers didn't emphasize the mirror, as far as I can recall. They didn't show any of Ribbons or of the other world, or like Grace or anything like that.
If they had showed Grace in the Next Time trailer, I would have been mad on behalf of people who watch Next Time trailers.
Yeah, the Next Time trailers this season so far. The funny thing is, this is the Next Time trailer for the next episode. The finale was the first one that I've actually liked, because I think the thing is that they need to find a way of making the Next Time trailers spoiler-free, which they have done so far. There's been nothing in a Next Time trailer that has given away a major plot point, which sometimes used to happen. But they've also kind of taken the Next Time trailers to the point where it's just like 15 seconds of random clips from the next episode that do nothing to actually make me excited for the story. Like, I just like, next week, and I'm just like, okay, I guess next week there's a Doctor Who episode. Like, yeah.
My philosophy on Next Time trailers is it's Doctor Who. Just tell me the date and the time, and I'm gonna watch it. You don't need to show me anything. Like, I think with the majority of Doctor Who fans, that's kind of all you need. It's to say Doctor Who Sunday 9 o'clock. Like,
well, I mean, it's not like I'm not going to watch it. I just like a well cut, interesting trailer.
I
just find them interesting.
I don't like trailers. Actually, that's not true. I have watched a couple hours sometimes of just random movie trailers, because there's a channel that I get that's just 24/7 movie trailers. But I never intend to watch those movies, is the thing. Like, yeah, because once I've seen the trailer, I don't want to watch the movie anymore. But the trailers, there's something about a well-edited trailer that's pretty cool. I'm weird.
So I think it's just the fact that I enjoy trailers even when I know I'm going to watch the thing in question. I just like seeing trailers. I don't like to see too much. When people... Like, a good example of a trailer that went too far was... Do you remember when... Because you watched the first few episodes, when Supergirl put out a trailer that was like 6 minutes long? And I'd watched it and I was just like, this is literally like they took the entire pilot episode and turned it into a 6 minute long video. And posted it on the internet.
I remember.
And I was just like, why would you do that? So I don't want to see anything like that, but I feel like the next time trailers so far have been so bland that I'm not sure they'd hook anybody who wasn't sure about coming back for next week.
Quick tangent, and then I'm gonna get back on track.
Yeah.
I went to go see some movie a few years ago. Don't even remember what it was, and there was a horror movie trailer before that. I think it was for Don't Breathe, and it was like a 3-minute long trailer, and they showed the first character to die, and the twist in the trailer. And the guy next to me goes, "They're showing the whole damn movie," and I was just like,
Yeah.
"This is why I try to avoid trailers." But for this next time trailer, I did not watch it, which is why I was upset when I went on Reddit to read the comments on the episode, and someone said that the Stenza were in the next time trailer.
The Stenza are not definitively in the next time trailer. There's a voice that some people have said sounds like the Stenza or Tim Shaw specifically, but I don't know if they're right, because these are the same people who were insisting that the voice on the TARDIS screen saying "Silence must fall" was definitely 100% Omega.
Okay, well, and so they might be wrong.
Yeah, so they could be wrong. I wouldn't be surprised if the Stenza were back, but, I don't think anything in the trailer made it seem more likely to me that the Stenza will be back than just the first 2 episodes.
Okay. Well, that's somewhat reassuring. The title being the Battle of makes it seem like it's going to be that it's going to be Stenza. That would make sense. That they like battles and unpronounceable names.
I've been calling it the Battle of 3 nonsense words, but I think the Battle of Horror is pretty good too. Chibnall does not have a gift for coming up with names. Stephen Moffat did, and Russell T Davies did, but Chibnall does not.
No, fun fact, that's actually Old Irish. It means 3 nonsense words. It's kind of clever. Yeah, it's that was it wasn't the coolest fictional language I've ever heard, but whatever, it's fine as long as it's a good episode. I guess there's been good episodes with bad titles.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite classic Doctor Who stories is called The Deadly Assassin, which is a silly title because, as multiple people have pointed out, an assassin by definition is deadly. And one of my least favorite episodes is In the Forest of the Night, which is one of my favorite titles.
Yeah, or Kill the Moon is also pretty cool.
Kill the Moon is a great title, but I don't mind the episode as much as other people do. The science bothers me, and the Doctor abandoning Clara and the others bother me. But it doesn't bother. It's not an episode that I single out as being terrible in the same way that I do In the Forest of the Night or Fear Her or Love and Monsters.
Which are actually all good titles. Side note.
They are all good titles.
Side note, we should do a bonus episode where we just do actual arguments that we have against each other. Speaking of titles, though, that was another thing to praise this episode for. It's a great title. It actually came up in the episode.
It is a great title.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was hoping you'd say you hated this title. It was the worst title ever.
And it does a good job setting up the sort of fake premise of the episode that there's a creature in the woods that takes people away at night. Mm-hmm. And by the way, the whole thing where she hears it the same time every day is such a great setup for the fact that it's just a sound on speakers.
Yes. It was very clever, the speaker thing, yeah.
Yeah, but, so it takes you away works for that premise of the episode, but it also definitely works for the whole thing of people being lured through a mirror, and it also works for the episode being about grief and letting go. People being taken away.
Yes, it works on multiple levels, and it's just kind of poetic sounding, too, even in a vacuum.
It is poetic sounding, yeah.
It's a nice title. solid, actually very, very good episode.
Yeah.
So what is going to happen next week? Not like what's the plot going to be. What's the season's kind of recovered after a bluntly terrible start, and now it's back in Chibnall's hands.
That's what I felt as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the season, I would have had a much more positive view of it overall if the episodes were mixed around a bit. This definitely needs to be near the end, because it provides the conclusion to Graham and Ryan's, to Graham's character arc, basically. And but the thing is that the other episodes in between the first episode and this one didn't really deal with it at all. But it still works best as like a conclusion. It's just the other episode should have been better. But I feel like if you just sort of mixed up the Chibnall episodes and non-Chibnall episodes, I think the season would have felt a lot smoother. Like if it had gone from Rosa into Witchfinders or Kablam, even though I'm not a fan of the end of Kablam. I think that the season people would have had a much more positive view of the season than the season going through a 5-episode block where every episode had Chibnall credited, even though he only co-wrote Rosa. But he worked on every episode for the entire first half of the series.
I would disagree a bit, because that sounds more like Series 8, which I hold in very low regard because it can't consistently do any... it didn't have 2 good episodes back-to-back the whole year. This one, having 5 at least, serviceable, at worst, episodes in a row to end the season with would leave a better taste in my mouth than something that never took off.
So that's actually an interesting question about which would be better. For me, it's kind of it's sort of odd, and I'm not sure how I'm going to judge the season, in that it felt like it went from bad to good. For me, starting around Demons of Punjab, I guess for you starting about an episode later. For me, Demons of Punjab was the turning point where every episode since then, I think, has been good. And every episode before that, not necessarily bad, but, definitely a mixed bag of episodes. A lot of them... I would say Ghost Monument, at this point, I'm actually leaning towards it's actually bad. And then you had Arachnids with its sort of not great ending, and then you had the Conundrum, or whatever it was, which was just this was an episode of Doctor Who. And overall, it's just not an inspiring start to the season, and I feel like they needed something early on to assert that Doctor Who wasn't going to be bad now, because I almost gave up on Doctor Who. And it takes a lot for me to give up on Doctor Who. I felt like in this podcast I was trying to be more positive than I actually am. A lot, because there was a certain point where I was just I was just okay, so Doctor Who is now about the quality of your average US television show.
Ouch.
And is this really a show that I need to keep up with every week?
Right. Well,
whereas
I actually have a theory now that the next episode's going to be amazing, and you want to know why?
Why?
Because my thoughts of this season are similar to yours, except for Demons being the crucial difference. I see the first episode is good, and then each episode after that being successfully worse, with Demons being the worst. And then, after Demons, each episode after that was successfully better in order. And so, by that logic, the best episode will be the last one, because it's like a V-shape in quality. And I think that makes perfect sense, logically. And
yes, that's exactly how it works.
There's no way that doesn't happen. Yeah.
I could definitely see the next episode being good. If the next episode is good, I think that's going to make I'm going to say overall Series 11 was a success, but still a mixed bag. if the next episode is bad, then I'm going to say that Series 11 was overall a failure with some good episodes in it. So a lot's riding on that episode for me.
Short of an all-timer for the finale, Series 11 is going to be a failure for me, even with the good second half, or better second half.
Yeah.
Simply
well,
because
what I mean
the
is
companions just didn't work except for, like, sometimes in guest episodes and then in this most recent one. But even then, like, Ryan's still not fully there, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think the thing for me is that if the finale is good, then I'm going to be like, okay, so they had some, like, teething problems and they had a little trouble getting off the ground, but I believe that they can put together a good season of Doctor Who next year. Whereas if the finale is bad, then I'm going to be like, okay, yeah, Chibnall's just not good at his job, and he needs to be replaced, preferably by someone like Haim or Wilkinson, who is a much better Doctor Who writer than him.
Back when we were talking about spoilers, I wanted to bring up, and I couldn't find a logical spot to say it. I saw a single picture from the New Year's Eve special.
Oh, yeah.
And I considered that picture a spoiler.
Hang on, which picture did you see? Because they've now put out a couple of them.
I've actually seen two. I've seen the one with her with a scarf, which I don't consider a spoiler.
That was the one I was talking about when I was, before the podcast, I was saying, like, there was a picture I saw. I don't consider it a spoiler.
I hadn't seen it at that time. I saw it later on. The one I consider a spoiler was one that just had her and the three companions in the TARDIS. And I consider that a spoiler because that episode would have been even better had I thought there was a chance Graham would choose to stay.
That said, so, Chibnall has, Chibnall was worked on Torchwood, and on Torchwood there is at one point where there is a character who was advertised as a main cast member, and they had them in the opening credits, and then the character was removed from the show fairly early on. So there was a deliberate sort of messing with the promotional materials to make it appear that this character was a recurring character when they weren't. And Grace was advertised as a recurring character at the beginning of this series, and there were pictures of all four of them together, put out as publicity pictures. So it's very possible that the New Year's special pictures are fake, and that one of the companions, or multiple of the companions, don't actually make it out of the finale. I wouldn't say it's probable, but I'm saying it's definitely possible, and it's definitely something Chibnall's done before.
There was a show that got canceled after one season because it was terrible, called Alcatraz, that did the same thing. They were advertising their one star as kind of like a main character, and he died in the first episode, which I thought was cool. It was interesting.
Yeah, it's a pretty old trick.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that that's necessarily like it definitely means that they want you to think that the companions are all in the New Year's special, but that doesn't mean that they necessarily are. The other thing I was going to say, though, than what I wanted to talk about in the last week, but I didn't want to spoil even the smallest promotional thing for you if you hadn't seen it, is that I really think that the scarf that they've added to her costume really pulls it together and makes it work for me as a Doctor costume. It's such a small detail, but I feel like just adding a scarf to the costume that she has makes it look really nice. Whereas without the scarf, it's still not quite working for me.
So, in addition to starting our HGTV interior designs show, you're saying that we should go on Project Runway?
I would do a version of a episode of this podcast where we talk about nothing but the Doctor's costumes.
That could work, actually. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I like the scarf. I think you're right. It kind of helps. Pull things together a bit. It looked good on her.
Yeah.
Oh, shut up.
It's
Cortana.
very Tom Baker, but it's not it's not so specifically Tom Baker that it seems like she's just copying him, if that makes sense.
Right.
Because it's like it's
I
a
remember
scarf,
the thing
but
that
it's
I
not.
forgot.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. What was the thing?
I was talking with a friend of mine about this episode this morning, and she pointed out something that I thought was brilliant, in that to her it felt like the 3 companions this year all each served one role of a companion. So Ryan was like, the audience supplement, like, or the audience surrogate, of like, oh, whoa, what's this? This is cool, whoa. And then Graham served like the comedy side of a companion, and then Yaz served like the action side. And you put them all together, and you have a full companion, but it's like 3/3 of a companion.
I think that would be a good way to set up a TARDIS team, but I don't think that they did a good enough job fleshing out those characters and defining their roles beyond that.
No. She was saying that these are that all these qualities should be in a companion. Like, that's the role of one companion. Yeah, and it's like these single traits fleshed out into one character. Like,
I have always preferred the multiple companion teams. Like, I liked Amy and Rory with the 11th Doctor better than Amy and the 11th Doctor. And I really liked the Bill, Nardole, and 12th Doctor setup they used several times. So for me, I love the very briefly lived 9th Doctor, Captain Jack, and Rose team. So I've always liked multiple companion teams, so I prefer having multiple characters serving different roles, but at the same time I kind of feel like the role of audience identification character is not enough of a role to give to a character.
Right.
That's the problem with it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's kind of one of the many flaws of Ryan Leclerc, or whatever his name is. Ryan St. John.
I genuinely don't know what Ryan's last name is. I've forgotten
Sinclair.
it. Ryan Sinclair. Ryan Sinclair, yes. Okay, yeah.
I pulled it out. That's still kind of like the critical flaw for me of this season, that the companions are usually just as much a highlight of the show for me as the Doctor, and even when the companions are better this season, they're not nearly as interesting. Like Rose, we complain about, especially like Series 4 Rose, but in general, even when I don't like a companion like Donna, they're at least interesting, and that they interact.
Yeah, the only companion this season that was consistently interesting every time they were on screen was Graham.
Right.
And that's because Bradley Walsh is a very accomplished and very experienced actor, which is funny saying that about someone who's mostly been on like soaps and Law and Order UK and hosting like game shows. But those are all things that required him to be a noticeable presence and to be able to react to things and to make himself interesting even when he's not the center of attention in a scene. Whereas I don't think the other two had that, especially Tosin Cole as Ryan doesn't have the ability to make a boring line of exposition seem like a good character line.
Whereas I think up until now, in the Josh craps on Tosin Cole's acting jar, by the way.
Yeah. I feel really bad about it, honestly, sometimes. I feel like I'm bullying him, but at the same time, I feel like my complaints are fair. And I feel like he's given some good moments, but, like, he's just not that great. Whereas I feel like thus far, apart from... I still don't think Catherine Tate was a very good actress when she started being on Doctor Who. She was basically doing her comedy sketch routine, but it wears thin when she's trying to be an actual character. But she improved by the end. But other than that, for me, I felt like every companion has been a decent actor, and in some cases a very, very good actor. Mm-hmm. Especially in the new series. Classic series, there are some wooden actors. But they all did, like, Jenna Coleman, I felt, could be given a script where a lot of her lines were just exposition, but she would deliver the exposition in a way that made it seem like she was a character, and she would give the lines some life, whereas Tosin Cole doesn't seem as capable of doing that.
Well, yeah, speaking of Janet Coleman, I rewatched the Zygon inversion one.
Yeah.
And as I was watching it, and I got to evil Clara / Bonnie, I was trying to imagine Tosin Cole doing an evil Ryan.
I just can't picture him doing that.
I can't even imagine. Like, maybe I could see an evil Yaz. And Bradley Walsh is a good actor, but I would just laugh at an evil Graham. I don't think that would work.
Apparently he was an evil clown or something in an episode of Sarah Jane Adventures. I've never watched Sarah Jane Adventures. I've been meaning to, but that's like definitely a reason to watch Sarah Jane Adventures.
That sounds interesting. But yeah, oh boy, I was thinking of, man, how would this work in the current series? And I guess the answer is just it wouldn't.
Yeah.
Jen is a very good actress.
That said, I feel like part of the problem was that until this episode, a lot of the actors weren't being given material that allowed them to show how they could act. Jodie Whittaker wasn't given any great material until this episode, and she has several scenes in here which I think were where she had very good Doctor moments, which she hasn't had much of since like the one scene in the very first episode, which was her first Doctor-ish moment. In this episode, when she's just like, nobody has experienced more than I have, nobody's loved more or lost more, felt like they were finally giving her some great material to work with. And some chance to sort of show the Doctor's depth. Last episode she was given some good stuff as well, but this was sort of like some very like sort of Doctor-ish moments. That of a sort that I don't think she'd been given up until the last couple episodes, which is very late, given that Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi were given a lot more of those sort of scenes very early on, as was all of the Doctors pretty much were given much more of those moments early on than she's been given. Until the last two episodes, this episode and the episode before, I really did not have a good sense of who the 13th Doctor was, beyond kind of generic Doctor, but now female and a little bit ineffective.
I'll be honest, for the last 2 minutes, I've just heard a sentient swarm of bees in my ears.
Oh. Well, my last point. Well, I was saying that until this episode and the episode before, I didn't have a good sense of who the 13th Doctor was, apart from being sort of a generic Doctor and a little bit ineffective compared to the previous Doctors.
Okay, yeah, I get it. I get a bit of a sense. It's still not fully there. It still feels
like... It's still not, no.
It feels like Matt Vid Tennant Smith right now.
Yes. Yeah, she still hasn't gotten her moment that really sort of defines how she's different, and she still hasn't gotten her sort of great Doctor moment that people are going to go... She hasn't gotten her speech that people are going to go up to other Doctor Who actors at conventions and ask them to read and put it on YouTube, if you know what I mean.
Right. I think that's a solid point. And with that, hour 5 minutes in, final thoughts? Or we have the traditional... We go into final thoughts, then we remember one more thing about the episode.
I feel like I had so many things to say, and now I can't remember any of them. Yeah, okay, I guess we can go into final thoughts.
Alright. Who first? Me first? You first? Flip the coin?
I've got a coin right here, so I can flip it.
Right.
Call it.
Tails.
It is tails.
Okay, I'm going first. God, I don't really know what else new I can inject into this. I mean, it was. I guess what I didn't stress enough was that it was absolutely bonkers, and in just such a refreshing way of how bold it was and how unafraid it was to just be unabashedly bonkers. I love that. And even if there was at times where I felt like it was a little bit of a mess, it was a beautiful mess, and it wasn't even that often where I was feeling that. Um, it hits every mark technically speaking. Uh, the direction is finally better. The visuals were great. The actors were strong. The writing was very good. The plot was very intriguing. It was very creative. It hit a lot of the criticisms that I'd had about previous episodes. My one thing is, I think you give it 10 more minutes, slow down like the last act, and you could really get an all-time great episode. As it stands, it's like a classic. It's probably the one that people are going to remember the best from this season. Um, and it does give you the most amount of hope that this new era of Doctor Who won't be afraid to go for it. And I felt that they've been too restrained and playing things too safe lately. So, all that said, for my penultimate number rating, because I think we've decided that we are getting rid of that next year. Rip in peace. Um, I just had a second thought of maybe I should give it a 10. It's gonna slide in at a 9. Um, very good. I can't I really am excited to rewatch it in the near future. Um, please don't screw this up on the finale. Just give me a serviceable finale, and I could like bite my teeth and say I was okay with this season.
Yeah. Yeah, I basically agree with just about everything you've said. It was a really good episode for me. It had suspense. It did a good job sort of flipping the story around in the middle, so it went from being sort of a base under siege to being a sort of completely bonkers and insane episode in a brilliant way. There was just sort of something like very slightly eerie and off-putting about everything once they go through the mirror. That sort of this sort of surreal feel to it that worked delightfully. I think it was so much. It was such a good episode. Yeah, it gave Graham lots of great material. Yaz finally felt like she was a police officer. Ryan was given stuff to do, I felt, with his interactions with the kid. I do think that he's still the weakest of the three companions, but there's always going to be sort of like a third wheel, fourth wheel, with a TARDIS team this big in any episode. Yeah, the frog being an entire sentient universe that was expelled from the universe before time began, like manifesting as a frog, is delightfully Doctor Who madness. The Doctor talking about her 7 grandmothers was funny. Yes, and I felt like Jodie Whittaker was finally given after this episode and the Witchfinders has been finally given some great material to work with, especially when she's talking to the other universe. She's talking about everything she's experienced, everything she's lost. She's talking about how delighted she is, like at the sort of to experience this alternate universe. And the way she just like the little touches, like the kiss she blows to the frog is such a wonderful touch, because when I saw that scene in the trailer, I was sort of wondering what the context to it was, and that was a wonderful context. And even from the first moments where she's talking about sheep taking over the world and tasting soil.
I forgot about the sheep thing. That's funny.
Yeah. And Graham's got his great moment early on as well, where he pulls out the sandwich, and my immediate thought was, I was just like, this is the most character these companions have been given so far. Just like the little detail of like he carries a sandwich around with him everywhere. Like that's such a great character moment. So I just think this was a brilliant episode. and it's just, yeah, this for me is a 10 out of 10. It's not quite like, it's not, say, Heaven Sent, but it is really, really, really good. Yeah, this was an episode I definitely enjoyed, and this was sort of what I was asking for last week when I was saying, okay, we've had some good episodes. We've had that Witchfinders was very fun. It was sort of like your traditional fun Doctor Who pseudo historical episode. But what I'd really like to see is sort of like a Blink type episode that completely blows me away. And I think this was that episode that we were asking for. So now we're asking for a finale that doesn't suck. Let's hope Chibnall can deliver on that one. And I give it a 10 out of 10. Did I already say that?